Hey everyone, welcome. It's wow, the first week in August already. I'm Jake Roberts, host of Ghosts of Bacon. Glad you could join me. I see people piling in here. Thanks for popping in, gang. Seeing a few of the usual suspects. Looks like thanks, guys. So tonight, what I wanted to do is something a little different. Instead of dragging out a dog and pony show for all you guys and talking about some of my latest research, I wanted to open it up to all of you to ask questions about my book. Those of you who have been reading it. Good evening, Michelle. Hey, Michael. If you've been reading it and as I've been talking to people who've read it and, there are parts of it that are pretty heavy to get through. There's a lot of flipping back and forth between tables and cipher signatures and those kinds of things. Hey, Penny, glad you could pop in. Thanks. So I wanted to clear some of those questions up. I wanted to talk about those kinds of things. But really, one of the big things I wanted to really make very clear tonight, I'm going to talk about the importance of cryptanalysis. I want to talk about the importance of cryptography in the sense of when, someone deciphers a message, the legitimacy of the message. This is something. It's a form of communication, been around for thousands of years, and the problem is that it really doesn't get the respect it deserves in that sense. When I talk about one of my fellow researchers, a friend of mine, a name all of you would recognize, I'm sure. We were chatting back and forth about some of our latest research, and this individual said, "Well, the cipher thing you do, that's all cool and everything, but," and after that, but I realized it was really just kind of a dismissive, it's cool and everything, but is it real? And so what I really want to do is I'm going to do a quick little presentation talking about all of those kinds of things. Judy, I'm glad you brought your thinking cap. Appreciate you very much. Thanks. So I want to talk about that a little bit and how this whole idea of cryptography, cryptanalysis, has affected history, in a very meaningful way. That when a cryptographer actually deciphers a message, that it's not just some hoodoo sort of someone waving a magic wand and cherry picking evidence to create a message that they want to see. It's quite the opposite of that. And so to that end, I wanted to talk about that for a little bit and then open it up to all of you for your questions. So before I jump into it, all right, I see Michelle, always great to have you. Daniel, Gloria, hi there, glad you could make it. Stephanie, hello, glad you could join us. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and share this screen with you. Want to make sure I share the right one. There we go. So really, this is about my book, The Holy Trinity Decryption, the hidden autobiography of Sir Francis Bacon. Now, I want to talk about, the ideas that appear in the book and the methods I use to identify them. And so I'm going to be going through that pretty carefully. One of the things I want to do first, I want to open it up. Anyone who has any questions before I even get started, you can feel free to just go ahead and throw them up there in the chat. But really, the purpose behind this is I really want to get the message out there that a lot of people are asking me questions about, Edward de Vere, for example, and the theory that he wrote Shakespeare. All I can say is this. I have read the definitive message from Sir Francis Bacon himself, and he states that he used the name Shakespeare to write the works. Now, he does mention De Vere and Devereux, the second Earl of Essex. They were both sons of Elizabeth. All of that is true. But he doesn't say anything about them being involved in the writing of the works of Shakespeare. I want to get that out there, right out the forefront, and be very clear about this. So why should people take ciphers seriously? Well, first of all, in Elizabethan era, everyone was using a cipher. If anyone was communicating and wanted to get their message securely to, say, their banker or their intelligence to the second Earl of Essex, for example, they used ciphers. So they were taken very seriously back then. In fact, the example, and you see the picture here I have of the book called The Code Book by Simon Singh. Great book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Michelle, I think that you picked up a copy of that when we were talking about it before. This is a great book. And one of the very first examples he uses, and it's the one that I always cite, is the Cipher of Mary, Queen of Scots. When it was intercepted, basically, when they were able to crack her cipher, it implicated her with treason of trying to depose Queen Elizabeth I, and that she would be taking over the throne. And so this is what actually ended up getting her beheaded. They decrypted her cipher and used it as the key evidence against her. And the beheading of a queen, that was the first time it had really happened in that way. And it was something that Elizabeth really, honestly, didn't really want to do, because then it would set a precedent that a queen actually could be beheaded. Not necessarily a good precedent to be setting as a queen. So even today, people, if you use encrypted email, or every time you use a secure website to make a purchase, for example, that's all encryption going on. That's the modern day version of it, but it happens behind the scenes, and all you're doing is clicking a button. So you don't realize and recognize how incredibly important that is to your security. But back then they had to do it manually. And so they knew how incredibly important it was. We've flash forward here to World War II. Suddenly decryption was right at the forefront. The Germans had Enigma, the Enigma machine, and it took the Allies a very long time to start to break it down. And Singh explains this really well in the code book. So what happened was, in Great Britain, after the breakout of World War II, at Bletchley Park Mansion, that became the Government Code and Cipher School. Now, one of the things they actually did, they brought together a lot of mathematicians and people that seemed to have a good knack for breaking codes. They even recruited using a crossword puzzle in the newspaper. They basically said, "Hey, listen, if you can solve this crossword puzzle in 12 minutes, let us know." And so they had, I think, 50 people or something respond and were able to do it. And from those 50 people, they ended up selecting 12 people to join the Government Code and Cipher School. And they were actually working on the German ciphers. So, here were people that were just had a knack for, figuring out word puzzles. And so the idea that an amateur such as myself could actually tackle the plaque of Shakespeare's Funerary monument and actually decode it, it's not so far-fetched. And so I really want to, again, moving on to the next part of this, and this is the part that I think is by far the most important part, the idea of objectivity. How do you make sure that you're being objective when you decode something and decipher something, and that the information that you are pulling out of it is reliable? Well, the very first thing I want to say about this is that I think it's very healthy to have skepticism. Everyone should be approaching things with skepticism. I tend to have a high level of skepticism about certain things, and that's a healthy thing. But when you are coming at it as a skeptic, that's something different. That's when a skeptic usually will just dismiss something without really looking at the evidence. If it goes against their own orthodox idea of how the world works and operates and what they think they know about history and the world, they dismiss it. That's different than being skeptical and having a healthy level of skepticism. For me, this whole process was a search for the truth. I wasn't trying to make results or create results. I was trying to just follow the clues where they led me. And to that end, one of the very first things I do is I always try to avoid cognitive biases. The precepts in my mind, the preconceptions that I have, my opinions about what I think may have happened in history, I have to set those aside and not look to confirm those biases. That's called confirmation bias. Only looking for the information you want to see. And so instead, I just looked for what was there. To do that, I had to follow what's called a standard operating procedure. You follow a pattern of behavior that will consistently churn out the truth of what's really there. You use objectivity and you use logic, and you just simply follow the clues where they lead. That's what I did with this whole project. Now, to that end, one of the things that I sought out was information, and the guy to read if you really want to learn how to do any level of decryption is William Friedman. He's considered to be the father of the NSA. If anyone knows how to do this or knew how to do this, it was this guy. He has a series of lectures that are out there. You can find them on the internet. I read everything I could find, and had lots of explanations on how to set up a standard operating procedure of how to do this. Another great source was Manly Palmer Hall, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. There's an entire chapter in there on cryptograms and cryptography of Bacon's ciphers. And then there's another chapter on Rosicrucian symbolism that is excellent. So what that did was that was a good roadmap to follow. A lot of the features that I found taking place on the plaque ciphers actually were described in Manly Palmer Hall's book. So in addition to that, I just use standard accepted techniques in decryption, using tables and placing letters in formalized arrangements in rows. This is what yielded all the results. So as an overview for this whole project, I took an interest in it. A lot of you have heard me talk about this in other podcasts. There were other researchers who have kind of blazed the trail in this, from Peter Dawkins and Peter Amundsen in particular, to my friends Chris Morford and Chris Dona. The latter two were involved in looking at it in relation to Oak Island and the Oak Island mystery and what's going on in the famous show, The Curse of Oak Island. Both of those researchers have appeared on the show. And they mentioned, maybe I could take a look at it, knowing, my interest in, cryptography and symbolism and those kinds of things. And so, that's what I did. I decided to take a try and take a stab at it and see what I could find. And what happened was I ended up taking a completely new approach. The old techniques that they were using in terms of, it's called steganography, the idea of identifying geometric shapes amongst letters and seeing where the lines cross these letters and those kinds of things, and seeing what they can reveal. That was yielding some results, but they were pretty limited, I thought. What I did actually yielded explicit messages to the extent that there are only 305 characters. I'm going to be repeating this a lot in this presentation on this plaque, and it contains Sir Francis Bacon's autobiography. And I'm not saying that as a form of hyperbole. I'm not trying to exaggerate. That's what it does. So one of the big questions here on the plaque is, whose name? Here it asks, read if thou canst. I'll be talking about this again. Whom envious death hath placed within this monument Shakespeare. So whose name is it? Well, I'm going to show you. What you're seeing here is my counting system. I counted each individual character on the plaque. And as I stated earlier, there are 305 of them. That's definitive. People have tried to question me on that. And all I can say is try to show me where there are more or less than 305 characters. No one's been able to do that. So when I talk about a character too, I'm talking about these conjoined letters here, like ME and NT. They count as one character because they're connected. And there's a reason for that. So to kind of show you the traditional way that a lot of people look at this information, when I did this count, I labeled each one of these letters 1 through 305. This image actually was put together for me by Chris Dona. He put this together so that he and I could use it and communicate about which character number we're talking about when we were sharing information on it. And one of the things that that people in the decryption, particularly of Shakespeare, do, they look at what's called an acrostic. An acrostic is when you can read a word, going down the edge of a page or in a pattern within the page. And here in the upper left-hand corner, you see ITS. Spells the word it's. And so if you want to know whose name is encoded in this plaque, well, we just add these numbers of 1, 38, and 72, which equals 111. 111 is the cipher signature and K cipher of the name Bacon. So whose name is in it? It's Bacon. But that's just a little simplistic example of how all of these codes work in this plaque. So the message, just on the surface, when you look at it, there's a Latin heading. The first 2 lines are in Latin, and it doesn't describe Shakespeare. It describes Bacon. It talks about judicio Paelium. Pilus was a king who was very, very wise and good as a judge. And so Shakespeare wasn't a judge, but they're saying that he had the judiciousness of Paelium, the genius of Socrates. Well, Shakespeare was not a philosopher. He was a poet and a writer. So why would he be compared to one of the greatest philosophers of all time? Well, Sir Francis Bacon was a great philosopher. And also the art of Moronum. Moronum is the last name of the poet Virgil. Okay, so comparing Shakespeare to Virgil, the greatest poet of ancient Greece, with, was it Rome? Doesn't matter. With another great poet, makes sense. Out of the 3, that's the only one that really makes sense. And then, of course, here in the very last part is that it says, and then he goes on to live on Mount Olympus. And yet, in reality, well, since Bacon created the name Shakespeare based upon Apollo and Athena, it's appropriate that they would be on Mount Olympus. But a lot of people don't know that Sir Francis Bacon was referred to as the philosophical Hercules, who eventually was able to go to Olympus. So when it states, read if thou canst, this is a call to action. This is saying, hey, you need to decipher this if you can. If you can figure this out, you'll find out the truth. Who death hath placed within this monument, Shakespeare. And I want to point out that in a moment, you'll see, again, another close-up of the plaque, but this states within this monument, Shakespeare, with a colon after the name Shakespeare. So the name Shakespeare itself is the monument. Okay, Shakespeare is not placed within this monument. So then it goes on and it mentions the word tomb, whose name doth deck this tomb. Well, it's Bacon's name if you look at it closely, but it's also a play on words because another word for tomb is crypt. And if someone is entombed, well, it's also, you could say that they're encrypted. So Bacon is encrypted in this plaque. So in order to do that, you have to decrypt it, which is what I did. So here you can see the close-up, and here you see where it says within this monument, Shakespeare, colon. So all of the clues, as I looked at this plaque, it just struck me that what was at work here was something called a transposition cipher. And all that means is that the characters that are on the plaque have to be transposed. They have to be changed. Trans means move, and position. You have to move their position. So you have to rearrange all of these characters on the plaque in order to discover the true message. And the clue was the conjoined and ligatured characters, because that means that they have to move together. Okay. You have that ME, the NT, and the TH, which is actually a double tau. Because they're connected, they move together as one character. And that's where I arrived at that count of 305. So this transposition cipher requires an algorithm. And usually with a transposition cipher, there's a word that can be translated into a number, or there's a numerical key of some kind. And you use that new number as the key. This is the algorithm. You count that number of characters and you pull that character out, and then you count that number again and pull that number out, and so on. And the thing about transposition ciphers is they are known to usually produce acrostic anagrams. Now, as I said earlier, an acrostic is when letters are connected and touching each other. And of course, an anagram is when letters are jumbled up and you have to rearrange them to create the word. So in the world of steganography and cryptanalysis, what you do is you look for clues, and they always appear in the form of errors or mistakes, what people would just consider to be a typo. It's usually a clue of what the cipher is. Sometimes it's an oddly shaped character or something that looks weird or off. Usually it could appear in the form of a misspelling or the wrong page number, for example, like in the first folio of Shakespeare. In this case, it appears in Shakespeare's Mistake in His Age. I'll point that out here in a moment. So the idea is, what do you use as a key? And the keys usually appear in steganography in the text itself. So that means that it has to be here somewhere in the plaque. So the basic features of the plaque, there's a lot of convoluted grammar, especially towards the end. The verse doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so there are misspellings. And a lot of people try to claim, well, spelling rules weren't really set in stone back then. Well, for the most part, they actually were. And furthermore, Shakespeare, who I state is actually Francis Bacon, because he told me so. I read his words, and they said I used the name Shakespeare, is credited with creating the English language. Up until that time, there were different dialects, different Latin being spoken in one area. You have French being spoken in one part of England, and Welsh in another part. And so this was a major achievement of consolidating the English language. So saying that they just didn't know how to spell yet, well, you're talking about the guy who created the language. So he spelled things the way he intended to. And so with steganography and cryptanalysis, like I said, mistakes are the clues. That whenever you see something like that, it usually is intended to draw your attention. And in addition to that, the conjoined ligatured letters, like I said, this meant that they had to be moved together at the same time when they were transposed. And so they moved together. And also the TH was a double tau / triple tau. This is a signature of Bacon. The triple tau, a lot of people claim that it's TT. It's the initials of the number 33, which is the simple cipher signature of the name Bacon. There's another reason why the triple tau represents Francis Bacon, but I'll get into that some other time. So all of these clues told me, okay, we're dealing with a transposition cipher here. So I needed to figure out what the keys were. And so along with that, you have to have an understanding of the cipher systems of Sir Francis Bacon. Now, if you're not familiar with those, I've already done a couple of videos on it. You can go check out my YouTube channel, Ghosts of Bacon. And on it, there's a video called Bacon Ciphers 101. And I kind of go through them rather quickly just to kind of give an overview of how they work. But basically, he had something called simple, reverse, and K ciphers, 3 different kinds of ciphers. And they had what's called a mathematical bijective function. All that really means is that each letter had a number associated with it and within each of these different ciphers. He had another one called the biliteral cipher. We won't be getting into that this evening, but that is the forerunner of binary computer language today. They actually used the same idea that he used when he created that cipher. He created that cipher when he was only 16, by the way. One thing that a lot of people hadn't known is that he actually uses a substitution type cipher between simple and reverse cipher. So when you have the letter A in simple cipher being in the number 1, in reverse cipher, number 1 is Z. So you can actually substitute those letters for one another. So if you saw a Z and you needed an A, it's actually an A. So this was based upon the Atbash cipher of the Hebrew alphabet. And it was one of William Feldman's publications that clued me into that. And then I discovered that I totally missed it in Manly Palmer Hall's book as well. He talks about it. So now I've kind of moved into incorporated a couple of other cipher systems that Bacon was known to use frequently. The first is called Elizabethan short cipher. You arrange the alphabet, the 24-letter alphabet of Elizabethan English in rows of 9 characters, one under the other. And then each of those letters represent the numbers 1 through 9 and so forth. So the last one is fourfold cipher. That one's a little more complex, and he actually used that in coordination with some of his aliases. So now on to the keys. What could I possibly use as the key for the algorithm? In other steganographic messages I found, like I said, the key always appears somewhere in the text. So therefore the key had to be somewhere on the plaque. And so because it's a transposition cipher, I needed the number to use to create the algorithm. And rearrange those characters so that eventually they would produce the cipher text. Now, in the lower right-hand corner, that's when I remembered, oh, there's a mistake in his age. They had him that he was 53, when in fact the actor William Shakspere was 52 when he died. Now, most people say, well, it's in Latin and it really means in his 53rd year. No, they needed a 3 there. So it was 53 and not 52. And so I found that out by looking at it and saying, oh, I have numbers in the lower right-hand corner and one of them's a mistake. I'm betting these are the keys. Turns out I was right. Obviously, you can't count 1,616 places on a document that has 305 characters. It just would be very cumbersome. So it occurred to me that I should use 32, 8, and 5 instead, because 32 in K-Cipher is the letter F, stands for Francis. He signed a lot of his correspondence with just F. So I'm like, oh, well, I'll give that a try. I thought that if I used all 3, in other words, I looked at, I'll kind of walk you through it here in a second, but I would rotate them all through 3 transpositions, and then at the end there was going to be a message, and hopefully it would say something like, hi, I'm Francis Bacon. I wrote all the works of Shakespeare, and Queen Elizabeth was my mom. Didn't happen that way. What I really, the thing that was one of the keys to understanding this was the count, how many letters and characters really were here. And that number 305 was very, very significant and important. And like I said, when I was rearranging all of these characters, the conjoined characters, the ligatures, they count as one character and move together. So when I was transposing the characters, like I said, I took every 32nd character and placed it on a line in a table. And as I passed through the entire plaque, as I got down to the bottom of the plaque, and then I moved up to the top row again, as I was counting to 32, I would start a new row in that table. And so I continued until every single one of these characters was rearranged using 32 as the algorithm. And so as you can see here, 32 here is A. And then so the next one was 64, which is this P. And then the next one was 96 down here, the B, and so on. And then what happened was I ended up with, these are just the first 7 rows of it, but this is the algorithm, how it turned out. And so here you see the A, the P, the B, the S, and so on. And at first glance, it doesn't look like much. But when you realize that there's also the substitution system between simple and reverse ciphers, suddenly you can start to actually read words. If you look closely, for example, here you can substitute a B for a Y, and here you have the word book, lo and behold. And so rather appropriate. I'm going to focus on line 7 just as a signpost, because this is what kept me going. I didn't think that there were any explicit messages in key 32 when I first did this. Like I said, I thought I was going to go through the 3 permutations, and at the end there would be a message. It didn't work that way at all. In fact, every single key had its own set of messages that were unique to that key, but also verified the messages in all of the other keys. They verified each other, even though they were completely different algorithms. So here you see, here's line 7. And what I did was I just took simple cipher and put their values up above it. NT you see is 32 because I just used both values. So the reason I looked at number 7 is that 7 is G in simple cipher, and G in K cipher is the number 33, and 33 is the cipher signature of the name Bacon in simple cipher. So here's what I did. I looked at this and I thought, well, wait a minute. Number 7, and then it says me, as if he was exclaiming me. So then I added up these other characters, and I looked at this and said, well, NT is 32. That's F. So me, F. Then I added up these. 4, 7, 20 plus 13 is 33. Bacon. Me, F, bacon is what this line reads. And when you total them up, the total is 92, which is the reverse cipher signature of the name Bacon. So this told me I was on the right track. So as I started to look at key 8, what I did was I rearranged key 32 using the number 8 as the key for the algorithm and rearranged all of those characters. And suddenly I started to see more explicit and easier to understand words and messages. They just started to appear. I'm like, oh, okay, things are getting clearer. And then I was supposed to use key 5. Now, here's the problem. There are 305 characters on the plaque. And so that means that when you get to the end, the first time it's just going to stop because you're going to end up on that last letter. The whole algorithm terminates. But then I saw in the middle of key 8 the phrase, I, the TT. Now, this is a double meaning. First of all, it's a pun. He's saying I, the 33, I, the double tau, triple tau. But I is also a symbol of reason, and I had to reason out the double tau. Well, T plus T is 38. Turns out key 38 created a whole new transposition. So I went back to the drawing board, back to the plaque, and I rearranged every character on the plaque using 38 as the new transposition key. And in lines 11 through 13, here was the phonetic message. Now, what I did was I looked for any phonetic messages first, and most of them were clues on how to proceed in decrypting the cipher itself. But here you can see where it says it cut out one BAMP's T in the TT. Now, a BAMP is a stupid or ill-mannered person. So he was telling the stupid and ill-mannered person that I needed to cut out one of those T's in order to use key 5. So I skipped one of those T's in that double T for key 5, and that key in key 5 of key 38 produced some pretty amazing results. So I returned to key 8 to see if I could use the same principle there and the same exact technique. I found the T that I was supposed to skip. It was the double tau where it says I, the tau. I skipped it, and that key 5 also worked and yielded amazing results. So the messages that appear in the ciphertext of Shakespeare's plaque. First of all, he states explicitly he made the plaque. Okay, he was the mind behind it. He created it. Also, he is not just but probably the member of the Fraternity of the Rosy Cross. He explicitly states that he wrote Shakespeare's works. Okay, he says, I used the legal name Shakspere. He also said that I created the name based on good old AA, as in Apollo and Athena, and not you, Will. That's in reference to Shakspere. So he also tells his true identity, who his real parents were. And it's not who you think. It's not who I thought. And that information was amongst the most shocking. Something that was really cool, he was a sailor. He was actually Sir Francis Drake's navigator for a time, and he learned to sail from him. And so a lot of people, that's completely unknown about Sir Francis Bacon because remember, he was so sickly. Well, as it turns out, he was perpetrating a fraud upon himself. It gave him the perfect cover for his spy work and some of his, privateering, shall we call it. He tells us the names of some of his aliases, and this was amongst the most shocking of the information. So the way I structured the book, the clear and really obvious and the jaw-dropping messages don't come until much later in the book. I probably shouldn't have structured it that way, but it seemed logical. It seemed like I should do it that way. The initial chapters, I talk about the discovery, the phonetic messages, the RC signposts. There's nothing really all that jaw-dropping, and a lot of people look at it and say, well, yeah, okay, is this supposed to be the decryption? And I get it. They're kind of underwhelmed, but the idea was to kind of bring people along on the sense of discovery that I experienced as I started to unravel this mystery. And then I throughout the book, I have step-by-step explanations of how I got to where I ended up. And you'll see, if you haven't read it, I go step by step of how I followed each clue and eventually figured it out. Each chapter has, or each key has its own chapter. Actually, key 32 has 2 chapters, because it wasn't until the end of that I realized that I had missed all of the really important messages in key 32. It was far more in depth than I had ever imagined. It has some appendices on it. A couple of them actually include the proposals I sent to the team on Oak Island to explain to them what the cipher text actually had to say about Oak Island, what was going on there. So the Oak Island messages are in there as well. So that is so much for not having a dog and pony show, gang. But Jason, thanks so much. I'm looking at going to try to catch up with all of these messages. All right, so yeah, we need a little more of that in this chat room. So, I'm looking at your messages now. One of the things that closer to the truth than you realize, Daniel. What was the name of the Bacon movie? Hamlet. Yeah, there are a lot of elements of Bacon's real life in the play Hamlet. It's really pretty impressive. Yeah, you know what? That was one of the questions that people ask. You see the capital I, the T, and the S, and F and L, capital 2. Yeah. And so it's hard to tell the capitals in there because they're only a little bit larger and they're all shaped the same. And so Jenny's on target. Yeah, this is exactly what Bacon did here too, Jenny. Using double and triple entendres like what they do in rap music. Absolutely. And it does even more than just give more depth. It enlarges what they're really talking about. It increases the message in that sense. So good point. Good point. Now, here's another great question. Jenny's asking, she wondered why the T has horns. Well, some of them have serifs, and so that's what the horns are. It's called a serif. You probably knew that, but the idea is that I think they're a distraction because there's also a biliteral cipher in the plaque. A biliteral cipher involves 2 different typefaces with a subtle difference between the 2. And one is an A alphabet, the other is a B alphabet. And then this is why there are 305 characters on the plaque as well, because you have to have a total of that is divisible by 5. Because you look at a row of 5 characters in a row, and depending upon an A, B, A will determine what letter of the alphabet it really is. So 5 letters represent 1 letter in reality in the biliteral cipher. So when you have these little differences in the typefaces, people are looking at that and trying to figure out, what's the biliteral message here? In reality, the differences between those 2 typefaces was very, very subtle. But it was actually far easier to distinguish than all of those little horns and serifs. So again, great comment there. So, I see what you're saying. Sorry about that. Yeah, ITS. The important part there was that the numbers that I assigned to them totaled 111. The F and L are also capitals at the beginning of the letter, but I suspect that if you're going to try to form an acrostic, see, and the thing is that it's not definitive where if it works in one spot, it's going to work along the entire thing. Okay, so that's why I didn't even really look at them. They were not what I would call significant numbers in terms of Bacon and signatures. But I see what you're saying. Great question. And so, thanks, Jason. I appreciate that very much. You say the book's great. did I get a date he completed the plaque? Actually, no, Daniel. Great question. All of the documentary evidence basically puts it probably right around 1620, between 1620 and 1622, because in 1623 it was actually referenced. I think that was the date. And so it had to happen around that time period. So even though the date on it is 1616, that plaque did not appear until much later than that. Let's see. Do letters ACE or AX mean anything to your research? Yeah, ARC is also 28. Yes, actually, he actually references the word AX in, I want to say, 3 different cipher texts, if I remember correctly. One of them was in reference to the second Earl of Essex, Robert Devereux. He really regretted the role he played in the trial. Queen Elizabeth ordered him to take on the prosecution, and he didn't want to do it. And so the reason being is Bacon and Devereux were close, along with Risley, Southampton. It's because they were in reality cousins. So those of you who have been following my work know that Francis Bacon was Elizabeth's cousin. And so, they shared a bond. And when Elizabeth was so outraged at Essex, and by the way, there is a legend where he was supposed to reach out to her for help to basically get him out of prison. And he was supposed to send her a secret ring that she had given him a long time ago, that if he ever needed her, all he needed to do was send her that ring. And he sent it through the wrong person, and who never gave it to her. And so that kind of sealed his fate. Bacon states that that case was his biggest folly of his career. And so, again, great questions. Why are there so many messages within the plaque? I've been asking myself that question for the last year, Michelle. And the thing is, I'm still finding more. It's so complex. Each one of these keys contains at least 2 separate messages. It boggles the mind. It's completely baffling. It doesn't seem possible, but unfortunately, it is, because those messages are there and they can be read. And so the reason is Bacon really wanted to record for posterity the truth. What really happened within his life, what role he truly played in world history. And it's such an amazing story. I mean, his autobiography, everyone, if you haven't read my book, I still don't have all of it in there. I'm still decrypting a few pieces, and the latest message I just found is still, I don't know what to do with it. I don't even know if I should share it, because it just sounds crazy, but it's really amazing. But the reason there are so many messages, Michelle, is he wanted to write his life story, and he lived the life of many people. A couple of weeks ago, you saw I provided some evidence, if you watched that episode, that he was alive at the age of 88, and he was present at the decapitation of his nephew, Charles I. So, that whole thing is, kind of the thing. Yeah, Daniel, when it came to Essex, he had no choice. He had to do it, because if he didn't, he would have implicated himself, I think. So what if there is a contraction? Do you count it as one word or 2? Oh, okay, Ruth. I think I see what you mean. Well, I didn't count words, remember. I counted characters. And now sometimes those characters within the ciphertext themselves would actually form a contraction. But contractions, I think one that was formed was the word shan't. And so, things like that. But As far as counting contractions, I mean, I didn't count words. I counted characters. Jenny, let me read it over here. Would Bacon have known if Shakespeare, the actor, was at his deathbed? I wonder if he had other works that couldn't be published due to his death. Yeah, great question. I don't know. I do know that what they did was, when they published the first folio, at that point, it was the first time a lot of this, they came out in the quartos, but not all of them. So who's to say that, he didn't have a bunch of them that hadn't already been performed that they included in the first folio? So yeah, it's a good question. Good question. I think that he either would have published them under a different name and still gotten them out there. It wasn't until later in life when he actually did publish books in his own name. So another question, Daniel. Do you think some of the info was meant to misdirect other spies that had cipher cracking abilities? I have no doubt that he probably did that in some of his messages, Daniel, but not this one. There's no indication of that at all. And at that point, if he's putting this up around 1620 or 1621, after the fact, after Elizabeth was already dead, what purpose would that serve? There's no reason to provide misinformation at that point. And so, especially when, here's someone who basically spent much of his life allowing a lot of his work to appear under other people's names, just like they say that you should do in the Fama Fraternitatis, the RC, their philosophy. It doesn't make sense that he would do that at that point. But interesting thought. And like I said, I'm sure that he did that with particularly, messages going to, or open correspondence, those kinds of things. I'm sure they were doing counterintelligence measures and things of that nature, especially he and Anthony for sure. Great questions, gang. And I put up the live phone number there. Anyone who, if you have free long distance, you can just kind of go ahead and call that number, 1315-332-1244. Can throw you up here on the screen. That sounded nasty, throwing you up. Gross. In case anyone has more questions. One of the things that I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, and it's the reason why I brought up the whole Edward de Vere thing, the Earl of Oxford. That whole thing it's taken on a life of its own. And I think a part of the reason is that up until this point, all of the same evidence that pointed to either de Vere, Devereux, or Bacon writing Shakespeare, it worked for any of them, right? It's all circumstantial evidence. Much of it, this idea that they were, the sons of Queen Elizabeth. As it turns out, Devereux and de Vere are the sons of Elizabeth. So, but they didn't write Shakespeare. Has Bacon been tied to the shepherds of Arcadia? Had to open that can of worms, didn't you, Michelle? I don't think he's been tied to it. Now, here's the thing. The Sidneys. If any of you caught it, Court Lindahl just posted a great piece in the Ghosts of Bacon group. He posted in a couple of other groups too, I noticed. Good stuff, but it's based on the whole de Vere thing. But it's also about the Sidneys and the Herberts. They were deeply involved with what was going on with Bacon. The whole idea is really pretty interesting. Whether he was involved in Shepherds of Arcadia, I don't think so. I don't have any evidence for that. And like I said, I don't like to speculate unless I have, some evidence at least supporting it. Yeah, sorry about the throwing up, Jenny. I saw your message there. Um, oh, what a great idea, Ray. It's really a future proves past mentality. Bacon knew this had to continue and would become relevant once again one day. Yeah, I think that he really understood the accomplishment of the works of Shakespeare. First of all, uh, but interestingly, he doesn't refer to Shakespeare as being his best alias. He assigns that to someone else, a different name that we're all familiar with. But it's again, I agree with you. I think that he was a forward thinker for sure, and he knew that someday the truth would have to come out. Let's see, William Raleigh. When he published Manus Verulomiani. I almost got that right. Um, when that was published, his forward to it stated that he would leave it to future generations to complete the fabric of who Bacon was and the depth and breadth of his work. And I think that this is a part of it. What a great question. Did Bacon know Poussin? I don't think so. The timeline doesn't really fit. I haven't found any evidence for that. I've been looking for a connection between the two. But one thing's for sure: Poussin knew Bacon. Yeah. It, there's so many interesting things that he includes in his artwork that are very Baconian. Um, yeah, he definitely understood what was going on behind the scenes. Oh, I see, Daniel. To protect certain people and something on Oak Island. I was thinking as a possibility. I see what you're saying. Yeah. The thing is, though, I think that we're getting into the Oak Island thing, and uh, I'm still held by a non-disclosure agreement, so there's not a lot I can say about that, except for the fact that, um, there's a reason why, and I referenced this the other day too, talking to some friends, but there's a reason why Court Lindahl's theory was the number one out of 25 on the Curse of Oak Island. It's always been one of my favorites for sure, probably if not the favorite. Um, I, you know, there were people who were able to do exactly what I did, and probably in a far more efficient way and in a clearer way of decrypting the plaque. That's what it was there for. It was there for people in later generations to learn the truth about his true identity and his heritage, and where he ended up in particular. We're talking about the vault of Father CRC. We are. And, some of us think that Oak Island is the location for that. I do have evidence to support that assertion. So, yeah, that's a possibility, Daniel. Yeah, Ray, I haven't found any identities from India, but Italy, yeah. Yeah. Battista Giovanni Boazio, he was the one who illustrated Sir Francis Drake's Cartagena campaign and drew the maps associated with Drake. Also, Tiberio Tinelli was another Italian identity. But he names both of those in the cipher text. But as far as anyone from India, I haven't seen anything of that. Great questions, gang. You guys always have the best questions and comments, I swear. So, but like I said, one of the big things that I wanted to try to hopefully get across tonight, and if I was able to do that, please, let me know. I'd appreciate it. Um, and that was the legitimacy of decryption, the legitimacy of the messages that are found through standard techniques that basically, reveal real messages. And that's really the big thing to talk about there. Michelle, I just asked, have I worked on other plaques? I looked at the plaque that was attributed to Sir Francis Drake that was found in California. Chris Dona was looking at it and shared it with me, and I started looking at it. And, I found some features on it that, in Chris's opinion, and I tend to agree with him. It has features on it that look as if it was created by an 18 or 19-year-old Francis Bacon. And then eventually he created his own plaque in his late 50s. And so, or 60s. So the idea that that particular plaque, we know it was hoaxed. The brass that was used in it was modern. And I floated, and people disagree. Some people think that it wasn't hoaxed at all. I think there's far too much evidence to show that that is not an original Sir Francis Drake era plaque. And instead, I think it was based on an original, though. I think there probably was an original in existence. It ended up in some private collection of a millionaire back in the day, and they decided to make a fake so that no one would look for the real one. That's my hypothesis, if you will, my take on that. But as far as some of the other plaques that are out there, there's some pretty interesting ones. It's gosh, there are a handful that do have, indications of ciphers on them. There is also the tombstone of Shakespeare that has a cipher on it that Ignatius Donnelly first identified back turn of the century. What makes me say that the Drake plaque may have been an early Bacon work? Well, a couple of things. There were characters on it that had a very specific symbolism on them. For example, the letter B, as well as the word spelled out B instead of BE, it was spelled out as BEE, which is Bacon states in his ciphertext that they venerate the bees for a variety of reasons, symbolic reasons. And so there were a couple of those key features that in my mind, particularly the bees, the letter B's, had taus in them. They had triple taus in them, and they could be easily read as triple taus. And so that indicated to me that he was probably the one behind its creation or its planning. But again, it without looking at an original and having provenance of it, I don't like to speculate. But great questions. Yeah, thanks. Oh, sorry, Ray, I didn't see your second question. Can you please repeat that second Italian name? Yeah, and I'll also type it here into the chat for you too. The first one was Battista Boazio, and the second one was Tiberio Tinelli, and I'm typing it in now. And the cool part of that was I didn't even know who Tiberio Tinelli was. So this is just another example of how the process works with just being very objective and just you're welcome, Ray. With following the clues where they led me. Yeah, TT, Jason, good eye. You're spot on. It was my first thought when I saw it too. The double tau, Tiberio Tinelli. But when I found the name, first I found Tiberio, and I knew that, we were talking about an artist here because of the nature of the message. And so I did a Google search of Tiberio Renaissance artist. And the first thing came up was Tiberio Tinelli with a self-portrait that looks remarkably like Sir Francis Bacon. And then when I looked at the ciphertext, intertwined with the name Tiberio was his last name, Tinelli. And so sometimes that's just how the process works of objectively looking at what's there, saying, I don't know who this is. I'm assuming it's an artist. And then doing a little bit, a quick search, and boom, it just pops up. Thanks, Ray. You just looked it up. Yeah, gang. It's like as soon as you look up Tiberio Tonelli and you look at his self portrait, you're like, "Whoa, that looks a lot like Bacon." So yeah, it's funny. One of the ones that was really interesting and still my favorite is, and a couple of you were there for one of my very original podcasts that I was on, and I demonstrated how Nicholas Hilliard was one of Bacon's very early aliases and pseudonyms. That's still my favorite because there's so many cool, uh, uh, I don't know, correlations between Bacon and that particular artist. Um, and especially since when you look at all of the people who would have been in Sir Francis Bacon's life because of his true secret identity, and then you see that every single one of them had a portrait painted by Nicholas Hilliard, you start to see all of those weird connections all of a sudden just appear right there. So it's really kind of cool. All right, gang, coming up on an hour here. So have the live phone line up there. If anyone wants to call in here last minute, any other questions people have here for the good of the order? All right. It does look a little like Walt Disney. Yeah. All right, gang. Now listen, coming up in a couple of weeks, I've been reaching out, putting my feelers out um, for guests to come on the show to spend some time with us, demonstrate what they know. I love learning from other people. Uh, oh, Michelle, good comment. I know he did want so much known about himself. Seems that having so many aliases would complicate this, or would it simplify it? Um, you know, think about it. When he wanted to uh, travel to another country and blend in, as just like the RC says they're supposed to, right? So he takes on a name from that country, and then he dresses like the people in that country, and he was fluent in multiple languages. And so, yeah, it makes sense. Oh, thanks, Barbara. I thank you very much. Ruth, when you wrote your book, did you include a ciphertext for us just for fun? Oh, probably. There might be a couple of little Easter eggs in there for you if you can find them. Still trying to figure out what the Disney comment. I don't understand. Walt Disney and you mean his connections to Bacon? Yeah, Jenny. The aliases were a way to compartmentalize the things he was into. Yeah, he had one for, well, actually two for astronomy. He had multiple ones for art. I think that being an artist, a master artist, was a way of getting into the courts of Europe. He was sitting there painting portraits of kings and queens while they were holding court, and he was gathering intelligence just by sitting there listening while he painted. I think that was a big sense, a big part of what he did. So the idea of compartmentalizing, yeah, he would have had, particularly when it comes to his work at sea, when he was helping to colonize. Let's see. Yeah, Stephanie. I suggest people. I mean, if you're used to Kindle and you know how to flip back and forth quickly, the paper form. First of all, I'm more of a Luddite. I prefer books to electronic versions. But in my mind, it's easier simply because there are tables and charts that you often have to flip back and forth to. For example, when on a couple of pages, I spell out, the simple cipher, reverse cipher, and case cipher. And a lot of people, when they're looking at my descriptions, like to flip back and refer to those tables, that kind of a thing. But I'm just not good at doing that kind of stuff in Kindle and electronic versions. So if there's an easier way to do it in the electronic version, then I say go cheaper and go Kindle. I want to save you some money. I think I found one, just don't know where to start to decipher. Start at the beginning, Ruth. Start at the beginning. Yeah, just like all of the techniques that I used in the book and that I explain in the book, if there were to be a cipher in my book, then if you follow those same exact techniques, then you'll figure it out pretty easily. Thanks, Awoken One. Why am I the only person to have liked this video? Shame on y'all. Hey, thanks, man. I really appreciate all your kind words and comments. I appreciate it very much. You guys are the best. Yeah, Michelle, thanks. I thought so too. It'd be a brilliant way to gain information. It takes a long time to do, and they have to sit for long periods. Think about it. I mean, probably the best spies in America could be hairdressers. I not that I know. Okay, I'm just saying that from my perspective, I think that'd be the one key thing where you're just gathering a lot of information, a great place to do it. Barbara's asking a question. If you're in the process of moving secrets back and forth, it's best to channel what type of secret per what personality. That's just it. His different personas. Really, what they were doing is think of it this way. It was kind of like a live action role play. It's like they were LARPing, only it was state secrets at work here. And, each persona had a purpose, right? And sometimes I found evidence where he was writing to himself under a different name to lend credibility of the existence of these people. So they really were people. People often mistake that I'm saying that person didn't exist. No, they did exist. A lot of times he even based it on another person of the same name. And those are some of the things that I've been picking up on. So yeah, I think so, Barbara. Thanks, Penny. Appreciate it. Yeah, Michelle. I've heard that from a lot of people. It's a slow read, but everyone's trying to pull out as much as possible. I've heard that from a lot of people, and believe me, I get it. It was a slower write. The idea of step by step trying to really lay out the evidence letter by letter takes it's hard to be able to really go through and read that kind of detail for sure. Maureen's asking a question. Of any Bacon's contemporaries that were aware of what he was doing with all of these different identities? Yeah. First and foremost, it would have been Anthony Bacon. He was his partner in all of this. He and Anthony were feeding intelligence to Robert Devereux, second Earl of Essex, who was then funneling it into Queen Elizabeth. Another person who was definitely aware is Sir Walter Raleigh. That's a name that often, unfortunately, gets forgotten. But he was in the thick of it. He was a heavy-duty operative, privateer along the lines of Sir Francis Drake, explorer, and yeah, he was in the thick of it. So those would be my main three guys that were in it with him for sure. Great question. Oh, thanks, Michelle. Appreciate that very much. You're welcome, Ruth. All right, gang. Anything else before we cut you loose? Jenny, I just saw your comment about the salon debacle. Yeah, classic. All right, everyone. In that case, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here on this end. And once again, I want to thank you. You guys are all thanking me, but no, listen, you're the ones who make it possible. You tune in live, and I have an audience that I can kind of feed off of and talk to, and field your questions, and you have great comments. And I really appreciate all your support of my work and popping in here every couple of weeks and listening to me drone on and on. But like I said, the next couple of weeks and hereafter, looking at pulling in some other guests. I have a few people who have expressed an interest in coming on, so looking forward to doing that. So yes, good night all, and thank you very much. I appreciate you all very much, and please take care of yourselves in the next couple of weeks, and we'll do this all again. All right, take care, gang. Thanks again. Appreciate you.